Hello and welcome to Starcast. This is Heather Rowan Robbins, and I'd like to talk about the month ahead for 15 minutes and then bring in a guest speaker. Today's guest speaker will be Arielle Guttman, an old friend of mine and great expert in mythic astrology, in the researcher that invented or brought to our attention the Venus star point work, which is now uh, so well received around the globe, and astrocartography, where I first knew her as one of the people doing the deep work on astrocartography. But right now, let's talk about this week and this month. Now, last weekend we had that Mars-Uranus square, just as Saturn and Neptune are within a degree in Aries. They won't fully conjunct until next spring. They have a retrograde cycle, but last weekend was a heavy trigger. All the astrologers warned this is a time of great concern. We saw what happened in Minnesota, where several wonderful uh, administrators, politicians were killed and hurt, and more would have been had the guy not been caught. We saw the military parade that didn't quite work, and that is a wonderful example of the Saturn-Neptune, which Ariel and I will get into. We're going to go in depth on that Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And we saw the, beautiful, vibrant Aries uprisings, the protests all over the country. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes out. We also saw the beginning of the war in uh, Israel, between Israel and Iran. Not the beginning, the escalation, because if you go back 5,000 years, the one thing you can count on is a war in the Mideast. At least that's from my research. And um, both Trump was having a Mars return, Netanyahu and Israel were all having Mars back, which happens once every 2 years, but it can be a trigger point for action. Today, I'm going to put our chart up for today. We're going to talk about what's going on in the month ahead. As we begin this week, the sun goes into Cancer, and we have the summer solstice on Friday, and we shift from this verbal Gemini time into that more thoughtful Cancerian juiciness, that time for connecting with the family and having those picnics. But it's also a time when we wonder what our edges are and who is home and what is our homeland. So Cancer, the image of Cancer is a crab that's soft and squishy on the inside and hard with claws on the outside. Can go deep into the underworld and also has amazing, spectacular defenses. So during that time, we ask people to deal with the softness in one another this whole next month. Honor that softness. Don't set off the defenses unless you do need to. Notice that those defenses can be spectacular. We see that between countries. We can also see that between people, and choose to use them more wisely. At the moment, and for the Mercury is also in Cancer. The Sun will join Jupiter and Mercury in Cancer, and Jupiter is in a tight square with Neptune and Saturn right now. Now that Neptune-Jupiter square can bring up blood sugar issues, a need for escapism. Watch that you escape in a healthy way this weekend or this time to get away to the woods. Take it. But watch that other people that are escaping without meaning to, in a good way. You also see a real dissemination of misinformation with that Jupiter-Neptune square. So question all facts, and that's going to be a real process this time. It's a powerful time for prayer. It's a powerful time for visualization of where we want to go instead, to redirect our vision so it's not always against. We know what we're going towards. That is key when you're working with Neptune. Friday night on the 20th, we have the summer solstice, which we will be talking about more. Then on the 22nd, Mars sextiles Jupiter. And that's, it's a friendly aspect, Mars Jupiter sextile. And it can give you a competitive edge, a little bit more energy, a little bit more oomph, but can also maximize Mars. Now, Mars has just left Leo, where it was just yesterday, where it was for the last couple of months. And that, was great for performing arts, but politics can feel like performing arts. And anger and the military and other Mars events can feel performative instead of protective. And their job, Mars' job, is to protect, to make sure that the bad guys don't invade. It's like our immune system is our personal Mars. Keep the bad guys out. Don't attack the self. And that's key. Then we have the Sun squares that Saturn and Neptune on the 22nd and the 23rd. Now, when the Sun squares something, again, it's going to happen twice a year because the sun goes around once a year, and that can bring up, pays attention to it, asks us to do our homework. The Sun Saturn square asks us to be a grown-up in the face of our impulses, our Aries rage, our anger, our excitement. Then the Sun conjuncts Jupiter on the 24th, and we have a sense of expansion. Now, what expands? Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So, what do you want to bring forth on the 24th as you expand? Possibilities, your garden, your heart, your love, or your anger and your defenses and your war. It expands whatever it touches. So, think carefully about it. Watch the sweets consumption all this week because that Jupiter Neptune square and the Sun square Neptune can really bring out our craving for carbs and sugars. Then Mercury heads into a sextile with Uranus on the 26th, and there's a lot of change in a short period of time this year. This time of year, Mercury conjuncts Uranus, and you want to watch that. Are we ready to change our minds? A sextile doesn't kick you down the stairs. It doesn't make you change, but it allows you to change. It encourages you to change. So how can you take that sextile on the 26th? If you have something you want to shift, if you have something you want to share with somebody else, and just crack open their preconceptions, that's a good time to do it. If you want to put in a proposal for something different, make it an offering. Don't make it an insistence. Make them curious with that conjunction. Then the Sun sextiles Mars on June 26th also, and gives us that energy, that bit of competitive edge. But what do we want to do with that? Then Mercury, which is in Cancer and has been in that self-protective place and that caring place and that defensive place, heads into Leo, which is normally heading into Leo is the summer arts festivals, performance arts, Shakespeare in the Park, Jupiter, Mercury in Leo, and Mercury can only be within one sign of the sun, the one before to the one afterwards, because it circles so close to the sun. And as it circles, that's why it was always the messenger of the gods. It spoke for the sun. So it's going ahead of the sun right now. Mercury, that means it has a retrograde cycle coming up, but it's way ahead of the sun. It's in Leo. It's calling us to tell our stories. Now, it can add bombast to political rhetoric. It can interfere with healthy negotiations because people are so performative and dramatic. But give it a chance to tell stories. Let people tell their stories. Get them sharing their thoughts. Now that helps as Mercury has a series of aspects because there are so many outer planets right now in those 0 to 3 degrees that when a planet changes sign, when the moon changes sign, it's going to hit uh, Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus. Uranus is about to change signs, so it's the last degree of the one before it. That's the first one it hits. Jupiter, first degree of Cancer, and Pluto, 3 degrees of Aquarius. So it's going to set them all off. So Mercury enters Leo on the 26th. It trines Saturn on the 27th, trines Neptune on the 28th, and opposes Pluto on the 29th. So you'd say all of those aspects are within orb, that 26th to the 29th. think about it. Feel what it's asking us to think deeply, to think about all the possibilities, to think about all the ramifications, to really consider the effects of where we're going. On the 29th, we may get, or around the 29th, some difficult news that asks us to rethink our situation. Then on July 4th, the Venus conjuncts Uranus, and it can be a change of heart. If you are in a relationship, that Venus-Uranus conjunction gives us a time every year to reevaluate our relationships and say, how do you want to change it? Do you want to add a little more spice? Do you want to, go have dinner someplace we've never gone and see each other with fresh eyes? Or if there isn't freshness in the relationship, our eyes tend to wander. We want a spark. So bring that spark into your creative process, bring that spark into your art supplies. Then the Venus heads into Gemini later that day because Uranus is right at the end of Cancer. And Venus heads into Gemini for a more flirtatious, relaxed summer. Venus in Gemini is great for meet cutes. It's kind of keep your eyes open for it, whether romance or collaboration or just getting to know the neighbors. Little passing moments that allow you to connect in easy ways. Just notice if your heart is restless to think carefully how to feed that in a good way. Neptune turns retrograde on July 4th, um, which can bring out the drinking pattern of July 4th, which can be a little problematic. Keep an eye on alcohol levels around you and in the drivers nearby. Venus sextiles Saturn and Neptune next on July 6th. Again, the sextile to that is it's fiery, it's juicy, it's interesting. It also stabilizes. That Saturn can act in a strange way, though Saturn in Aries is not stable. It is feisty and it is curious, but that sextile can help us appreciate what we have and appreciate the people that are in our lives that are there for us and appreciate our spiritual path and appreciate our imagination. Uranus enters Gemini on July 7th. Arielle and I will also be talking about that more. And we'll say that that's going to be an interesting shift. We may feel a lightness after that, a chance for change, a hope that if we can keep the conversation going, we can shift gears. I think we're going to see a lot of information. Uranus talks about equipment. So your Uranus going into Gemini will bring us more into AI. Will start integrating more into our lives. And it is best to kind of get on top of that, not that you want to use it, but to understand where it's influencing your life already. If you choose to use it, wonderful. If you don't, be careful. Then Venus trines Pluto, deepening our heart again later on July 7th. Saturn and Mercury both turn retrograde on July 12th and July 17th. So mid-July, everything begins to slow down. You're going to think it clearly. So get what you can done before then use mid-July to deepen your work, to return to something that's important to you, to edit your work, to come back to the people that you've known and love. And don't be surprised if old problems show their head up for the next level of work. So I'm going to stop this for now and we'll be right back. Hello, and I want to welcome my dear old friend, Arielle Guttman. Arielle and I used to speak together in Santa Fe once a month. We taught together. We did workshops together. Arielle began her studies in 1974 and has authored 5 wonderful books in this field. Her Mythic Astrology with Kenneth Johnson is the reference book for astrology and the mythos and the depth of it. Arielle's work is deep. She took time off to research her Venus Star Point book. She took a whole year off and just did that depth. I have such great respect for your intellectual rigor with astrology as well as the depth of your understanding. She also wrote a book on the astrocartography, Book of Maps with Jim Lewis. The best astrological weekend I have ever had was you, Rob Hand, and
I
studying
remember that.
traditional astrology and astrocartography. It was fascinating. That was really wonderful. Then
Yeah.
you did a local space line chart, put it in the middle of a table, and we realized how we'd all been acting out the planets all weekend. That was just astounding. But
Yeah.
but your work on the Venus star point work and your book Venus Star Rising: A New Cosmology for the 21st Century has been the real gift. You know, we see that I am going to add to this. Oh, sorry, remove. I'm going to add your books. You can be found. You're living in Greece now. I knew you in New Mexico.
Been living there for been living in Greece for 4 years now.
Hmm. And your work on the Venus star point. Would you like to give a quick summary of that? And then we're going to get into the astrology of the moment and the transits. But I just want to make sure that we have you in here. So
Well, the quick summary is that it's just a really much more in depth and broader look at Venus, the planet Venus, like you've never seen before. And it involves her star, her orbiting star, because she orbits in a pentagram. And the book details the astronomy of that, the mythology, the why Venus has come to be known as the goddess of love and harmony and beauty, because the pattern itself is so beautiful and almost perfect harmony. But then you find your Venus star point, you put it in your chart, and the rest is like do what astrologers do, just go with it, because it really taps into an area of your chart that lights the whole thing up and makes it really kind of a beautiful thing to explore. So there's a lot at my website, free videos to watch about the Venus star point and articles in the archives that you can read about it. I didn't take 1 year off to write the book. It took 7 years
seven years.
from the time the material first came to me in 2004 to the publication of the book in 2011, 7 years of my life dedicated and
I just remember you
totally
disappearing
immersed.
for a chunk and really
I
immersing
did.
yourself in that work.
I did. And I was in the most beautiful place to do it. I had a beautiful house in Santa Fe out in the country. I had no neighbors, no noise, nothing around me. I was like, I had a studio, like my own studio to work, spread all these charts out on a long table and look at drawing all these stars and looking at all these research examples. And it was actually quite fun to work on the book. It was one of the most enjoyable things I'd ever done. And I was just interviewed by some other people recently, and we were talking about that time period. And she said, well, what was happening in your chart then? And besides the Venus star being very prominent in my chart at that time, I was also having my second Saturn return. And my first Saturn return is when I actually became a professional astrologer. And the second Saturn return, it took almost 30 years for this book to come out. And that's when it came out, right around my second Saturn return. And so I had to say to her, my Saturn returns have been really very fulfilling for me. And contrary to what a lot of people might think about, oh no, my Saturn return is coming. It's actually, if you're in the flow, if you're in the right work, if you're doing the right thing that Saturn wants you to do, it's actually a very beneficial time.
I got my first book out, Moon Wisdom, on my second Saturn return also. And that the process, I think, for women, I think of it as maid, mother, queen, crone, that we really step into our queenhood. Like we're here to do what we're here to do. We're not here to mother other people's stuff. We can nurture them, but we're here to do our work. We're be the queen of what we know. and that's what happens. That kind of really fruiting. I see old apple trees around here that they hit a certain age, and all of a sudden they bear all the fruit. They just put everything into their fruit, and I feel like that's our second Saturn return.
Yeah. I'm thinking when you're talking about that, do you remember that plum tree at my house?
Yes,
That first house I had in Santa
yes,
Fe in the front yard. And every August and September during Virgo season, it would just be loaded with fruit and just dripping, dropping off the tree, just like tons of plums
eh,
falling.
yes. They were like ripe plums falling. That was what the
Yeah,
writing that book was like
exactly.
for
I
you.
loved that. I always loved that. Yeah. So
So
anyway,
we're
well,
gonna.
it's good to be with you again and reminding that we did work together very closely a long time ago. We also worked with Alan Oken
Mhm.
for a while, and we collaborated. We were the Aries trio. He
You're
being the
rising.
sun,
Yeah.
he being the sun, of course. Alan was the sun.
Sun and Aries, huge
You being the
personality.
moon
Yeah.
and me being the rising.
All in Aries. And we did. We put on, we talked about things from those three different perspectives, and I loved it. That taught, I now do Access Astrology with Mark Woltz and Ann
Yes,
Ortley once a week because I liked working in that trio so much. I think it's so productive that we can
yeah,
just pass the information around and work and bring it from different perspectives and share from that place. But that
yeah.
you were the original. But so
Well, yeah, we kind of created that format in Santa Fe. I mean, I don't know if we created it. There might have been other people doing that, but we started a lot of things in Santa Fe in terms of the astrology community and the astrology forum. And like you said, the monthly talks, but then the yearly talks that brought in a couple of hundred people every year. And you just posted those pictures of the astro drama that we would do at
we
the
had
end of
such a
each
blast of
year.
that. Hmm.
That was amazing and a lot of fun. And I miss those times. And
Me
when I
too.
was just back in Santa Fe recently, clearing out books in my old storage unit, I was reminded. In fact, you were posting the pictures at the same time I had just arrived in Santa Fe. And I
Wow.
thought that what synchronicity to remember the history of what we had really started there, in terms of an astrology community.
That was
So,
wonderful. It was the best I've ever seen. And so I want to add today, this Friday is the summer solstice. It'll be at 8:42 p.m. here in Western time, in the Mountain Time, because I'm in Montana. And when will it be in Greece?
well, it from Montana, from Mountain Time, it's 9 hours later. So it's
Okay,
going to be
so
early the next morning.
early the next morning, and it will be a really interesting summer solstice, I think, with the sun conjunct Jupiter. Now, with
Yeah,
5 planets at the very end or very beginning of a sign, whenever a planet changes sign, it rings all the rest of the planets like a bell. We've got that Sun Jupiter conjunction, and then we have sextiling Mars because Mars has just changed signs, quincunx Pluto, and sextile the Moon, which will have just changed signs at that moment, and square Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune conjunction. What a solstice! Now you've got it up with transits. We want to talk about that to the transits to the American chart, which is really fascinating. But what do you tell me a little bit about what you're seeing here?
what I'm seeing and feeling here is that we just had a president trying to be a king and having a great big military parade, which to me speaks of Sun and Jupiter in the fifth house. Now, I
Mhm.
know this chart is centered over New York, but if you relocate it to Washington, there's not much difference. It's going to be the same because the chart I have is for Washington and Pluto is rising, up from
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
underworld. So Sun and Jupiter, give me a birthday party, give me a parade, but it's squaring Saturn and Neptune from Aries, and I don't think it came out the way He actually intended it to come out, for one. And the parades and the protests that were even bigger, that made much bigger headlines, and there were much bigger crowds, were the ones protesting the king for no King's Day. So I think it's interesting that the sun and Jupiter together would indicate something like a king. And then you've got Saturn squaring it and Neptune going, hey, we're not buying this. This is not, this is no King's Day. This isn't King's Day. So I just lost you on the screen. I don't know what happened.
I can still hear you and see you.
Okay, I got it back now. The screen just keeps fading in and out. But anyway, so that was the first thing I thought of. And then Pluto rising in this chart from the underground, like a whole lot of people, rising up in, and also this dark Plutonian thing that right now, these ICE raids and these illegal arrests and even shootings and killings of politicians in our country is really a dark chapter right now. The Pluto's rising quincunxes the sun, Jupiter, and it squares the moon. So it's like it's not in good form. It's not in good shape. It also quincunxes Mars, which makes, what we call a yod or a finger of God pointing
to Mars. Yeah. There's one to Mars and there's one to Pluto. And, and they both have that Mars-Pluto trine, not trine, quincunx, the Mars-Pluto leg, and they quincunx, and then you've got the one that's one points to Mars, one points to Pluto. So it talks about what are the issues of life, death, and how we use our Mars. And our Mars, I think that Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries is really era defining. And they're about to conjunct, but then on July 4th, Neptune retrogrades. On July 12th, Saturn retrogrades. They go back into Pisces this fall, turn direct late fall, beginning of winter, and then conjunct in Aries on February 20th. Now that conjunction, I see both, Neptune, Saturn constricts and asks you to grow up. But it talks about the control. Neptune is what's our vision? What do we idealize? And together in Aries, there's two, we saw those two Aries responses. One idealizes control, Saturn, like someone's going to be an authoritarian is like Saturn wanting to be an Aries on one side, but it's also rebellion. It's the rebellion with Aries. Nothing is more rebellious than Aries. It's both the leader, the general, and the rebellion, and idealizing both as this part. I mean, it's been hundreds of years since they conjunct, though they conjunct every 37 years. They haven't conjuncted Aries in a very long time.
Right.
So
yeah,
I want to say you had a better slide, but we couldn't figure out how to get it up. But here is the American chart, the Sibley chart, and the aspects around it, which are really telling. And you said that you pointed out that there were several planetary returns. Tell me what you see here.
Well,
and I will point to it.
There's 4 planetary returns, 3 right now, basically, but 4 in the near future. The 4th one is a pretty big one. It's the Uranus return, but that won't be exact until 2027. However, it's within 9 degrees of the return position of the natal position, and for
Uranus,
for 360 degrees around a wheel, 9 degrees is a pretty small space. And I think Richard Tarnas uses 15 degrees for the outer planets in terms of their impact on what their period of orb actually is. So if you saw it 15 degrees before and 15 degrees after, you're in the period of the Uranus return. We're within 9 degrees right now. So we're definitely, and even though Uranus is just barely not even into Gemini yet, it won't get there until July 1st. We're already feeling it.
Yeah,
We
we
are
are.
definitely feeling it, like revolution. And I think it's that underground thing, because with the Neptune square that you just, we would just talked about, Neptune squaring, Neptune conjunct both Saturn and squaring Jupiter, both of them squaring Jupiter. Um, I think people are so utterly confused, astonished, not even knowing how to act, how to react to this. This is something, what's happening now is, I don't think anybody could ever have imagined that we would get to this particular place in our history. But I'll say one thing about the Venus. We talked about the Venus star before. It is a very slow orbiting cycle for the Venus star to return, the 5 points of the star to return to the same position that they occupied, let's say at somebody's birth. And that time period is 251 years. And the Pluto return is 248 years. And we all know that the US just had a Pluto return, but it's in 2026, we will have the first ever Venus star point return. And that will take us into
In
2027.
2026. It's interesting.
Yeah, 2026. So, and it will take us into 2027. And so basically, we are at the point in history right now of the American Revolution, the Revolutionary War, the Declaration of Independence, not quite yet at the creation of the Constitution, but we are having a constitutional crisis.
And Pluto returns to the Constitution when it hits 14 degrees of Aquarius. So that'll be, we're building up to the Pluto return for the Constitution itself.
We certainly are. And so I have been talking about this for a while too, that this Venus star return, we've had the Pluto return, which is the completion of that cycle. And we're about to have the Venus star return, which is going to be the completion of that cycle for the first time. And right now we're in the period in between. We're kind of walking in the void of not really having a lot of clarity about what's going on. The Venus star point return will come at the end of October 2026 when it hits 1 degree Scorpio. And that is right before the next election, the midterms, 2026 will happen in early November. So it's possible we will see something really major happen at those elections. But somebody was talking about that after this election and saying, well, we've got the 26 midterms coming up. We can always reverse course. And I was thinking at that time, when they said that, I was thinking, this administration has only been in office for 1 month. I can't imagine waiting 2 whole years for, and the devastation of what happened in 1 month. There was so much in that first month that just went completely overboard. I thought, well, what's the next 23 months going to look like?
I just can't believe it. Yeah.
So it sounds like we probably have a little bit of a political bias here, and I'm okay with that. If people don't want to hear our point of view, then they don't have to listen. But I feel like it's time to speak up. And this brings me to the Pallas Athena return. Pallas Athena, as you can see in this chart, is only 2 degrees away from the natal position, which is conjunct the moon. And I think it's always why Americans have felt, with Pallas and the moon and Aquarius conjunct, why they've always felt like we live in a free country. Our freedoms are the most cherished things to us. And if we don't like what's happening, we're not afraid to speak up. And we're not afraid to follow the law, to enact due process when it's necessary, to let the legal system take it over, to let it go into the courts and all of that. Now, Pallas went retrograde within a degree of the return. So it didn't quite make it to the full thing. So it's going backwards for several months retrograde, and then it's going to come forward again. So this Pallas return, even though it's really very closely in orb right now, it won't complete until early 26. And I'm going to say, watch this space, meaning the courts and all the lawsuits that are actually being filed right now that are citing violation of very basic, very important laws of the U.S. Because I have always seen Pallas Athena as, the legal aspect, the goddess of justice, the goddess of, court cases and the law and, following the laws of the land, meaning the laws of the nation. And we can see that right now, if you look at the last Pallas return, the asteroids have about a 4-year to 5-year return, a cycle of return. And if you look at like 4.5 years ago when Pallas returned last to the US chart, we were right in the middle of COVID and the vaccine, the emergence of the vaccine. And it brought up all these questions about what is legal? Can the government force us to have vaccines? And the people chose to say, no, I refuse. Again, this is the idea of the people having the freedom to do what they want. We live in a free country. People in America, they don't want to be told what to do. And so there was this big backlash against vaccines that came up, and you still hear people talk about it, whether it was legal to push it and to force people to take them, whether, going to work or school or being in public places or whatever. And now we have, at this Pallas return, we have government laws, constitutional laws being broken left and right by government officials, and not at all. So I feel like there's a whole idea about the laws, what's fair, what's not fair, what's legal, what's not legal. And this is what's going to be brewing, what is brewing with this Pallas return. And it's also activating that Moon Pallas natal conjunction of, there were millions of people all over the country marching for No King's Day, protesting, in the streets.
Mm-hmm.
How many?
Roughly 14 million.
That's amazing when you think about it.
In all the states put together.
And how many showed up at the military parade?
Less than showed up in Minnesota.
Wow. That tells you
so,
something.
Yep. But I thought, this Saturn Neptune right at RIC is like, what is the fundament? Again, that's the taproot of the chart. It's if you drop a line through the person, through the moment,
it is
through the center of the earth down here, and we are dissolving and rebuilding our taproot. Now, I noticed that Saturn Neptune at the top of the chart had just passed a conjunction when our country was born. So I just pulled up the chart for the Boston Tea Party, and we don't have a time on that, but do notice that there was a Saturn Neptune conjunction, that the rebellion was already picking up speed when the Boston Tea Party happened, and that was 3 years before the Declaration of Independence. So that Saturn Neptune is key, and that was square the sun and hitting the nodes at the time of the of that rebellion, and Uranus was trining into this.
And by the way,
Uranus is going to be sextiling now, but go ahead.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. I hadn't looked at that chart, but I have looked at the Constitution chart, And the U.S. Constitution has those same late degree Virgo planets, not the same ones that are here, but many late degree Virgo planets. And that when I was looking at Saturn and Neptune in the late degrees of Pisces in this last couple of years, it was opposing the sun in late Virgo. I think the sun is around 24, 25 degrees of Virgo in the
Yes, it was.
Constitution chart.
Hmm.
So,
It is. And so we're going to go back to the transits for the USA. And we go back to the USA. There's that the South Node is now sitting this right on our Neptune in the house of how we're seen in the world. And I think we are misunderstand. There's a huge cloud, Neptunian cloud, between us and the rest of the world. I think a lot of people were really heartened to see the protests, to think that all of America hadn't gone MAGA. So we've got that Neptune. We're asking ourselves, what is our vision? How can we move through this cloud of misunderstanding and misinformation that's being so heavily spread? But I think that's happening now. And I like that you said we have the Jupiter return, the Mercury return, Uranus is coming back to a return. We have a Pallas Athena return. We've just finished the Pluto return. And I think we're really coming back to who are we? Like recommitting to, and America does things best under pressure. So recommitting to our Constitution. I think that's part of the coming Pluto return is, and to the Constitution is it is essential that we recommit to our vision statement of the Constitution.
right. I was noticing this past spring with all the retrogrades, Mercury and Venus going retrograde over the world point in early Aries 3 times, Saturn and Neptune crossing the world point, which they would eventually do for 3 times and not finished yet. And the world point and the eclipses, kind of going into that too. But if you go back to that last chart for a moment, the last one, yeah, that one. If you take a look at, there's Venus in early Cancer in the 7th house of the US chart. And the Venus star point was early Aries, almost exactly square natal Venus. And so was all this early Aries squaring it. And one of the things that I had been commenting on, and I still think is true, is what do we think of with Venus in the 7th house? We think of relationships. We think of alliances. We think of our friends and our partners and the people that that we deal with. And yes, the U.S. has been a very prosperous country, very abundant.
Good ally.
But it's involved. But part of its success has been our partners, our allies, not only our allies to support us in military engagement, which we have done, which we have called on for many, many wars that have happened, but also our economic partners and people that uphold, other countries that uphold democracy, and our trading partners and our closest partners like Canada, like Mexico, like the NATO countries. And we've had a pretty messy, or in the middle of a pretty messy, bloody divorce from many, many of our closest partners right now. Will that stick in the long term?
That's square to Venus. Yeah, it's going to be a tough year for that, because that's going to be on and off all year.
That's what I saw, was like, wow, this is like a huge separation,
We cannot, normally we can count on the goodwill of others with that, we have supportive people. 7th house is what we ask other people to hold for us. So that 7th house is, we ask people's generosity, their love, we care for them, their military. But this is putting a hold on all of those good wishes until we reconstruct them. And trust it's really Neptune can dissolve, and it's dissolving that warmth, and it has to be not gone back to, but rebuilt after this. There's a lot can see with this dissolving our foundations that we have to rebuild. We're not going back. They can't just magically return it to where we were.
Right.
There's been a lot of damage, but we can rebuild it in a stronger vision. Pete Buttigieg talks a lot about that, like we not going back, but what is it that we value about the country and take it forward. So I see that,
Yeah.
um, that 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 need for revisioning our very foundations, and that it's interesting that it's not. It's already passed the opposition to Neptune. That was the first Trump administration. Neptune
Yeah.
was opposed Neptune,
Right.
and
And everybody was like, what the hell is this?
right, and then we did it again. And then and either we did it again or there was an illusion about that. Yes. And now Neptune is sitting right on the IC opposite the midheaven. And, this chart, we look at this chart, the Sibley chart is sort of, I think of it as mythic America. May have been other charts that post the power behind the scenes or when somebody else signed, but this is the registered birth moment of America, and boy do the transits fit, you know
Yeah.
when the
Also, when Saturn's at the base of the chart like this, the IC, many observers of the Saturn cycle feel that it's at its pretty weakest position because it's regrouping, it's
Mhm.
gaining ground. It's strongest when it's at the height of the chart, which of course you see in the United States natal chart. Saturn is at the height of the chart up there in Libra, in the sign of exaltation, Libra, in the house of rulership, Capricorn, 10th house. And so Saturn is actually very strong in the US chart, even though it's square the sun. Okay, that involves some,
there's always
other
mhm.
problems, but Saturn itself is pretty strong there. Right now, it's getting ready to oppose within a year. In about another year, it will oppose its natal position and square the sun, and it's at the base of the chart. And so in the cycle, when Saturn's up at the top of the chart, it's considered the strongest. When it comes around to the bottom of the chart, it's considered kind of it's shedding its skin, it's regrouping, it's dying, it's going into, in the myth, Saturn was tossed into Tartarus, which is like the far-flung area of the world, and Hades or whatever, to do whatever it was doing after being the ruler of the golden age for so long. And so it's Saturn is really regrouping right now. Now, Saturn also speaks to the leadership of the country. And I think we can safely say that whether you're Democrat or Republican or what you feel about Biden or Trump, but these last several years have been Biden Trump as the leader, while Saturn's been in this low point, that many people did not see Biden as a strong leader because of his age and his memory and, certain things, even though he might have done some wonderful things while he was in office, but was not perceived as a strong leader. Trump is definitely not perceived as a strong leader by a lot of people, except the people that follow him, very, his worshipers. And so, Saturn is not at its strongest right now
Mm-mm.
for the US. I mean, in terms of its leadership. But one thing that the divorce, that,
Mhm,
that
mhm.
Saturn squaring Venus and Neptune squaring Venus, for one thing, the other countries, Neptune square Venus is a really big thing. I mean, Saturn square Venus might be, oh, my partner and I are having a disagreement right now over money, over tariffs, over
It's
this, over
hard to
that,
love, yeah.
but we can eventually work it out. But Neptune square Venus is another whole thing. This is like, I just caught my husband cheating with another woman. I've lost my trust, I've lost my faith, I don't know if I can ever get it back again. So the former partners of America, Neptune square Venus is like, I don't know if we can ever trust America again, you know? he, they're cozying up to Putin, they're cozying up to North Korea, they're cozying up to China, they're abandoning Europe, they're abandoning Canada, they're abandoning all the people that have been here to support them all these years and to be their allies. So there is a huge mistrust going on right now by people outside of the country. And I see this from living outside of the country. I really hear the conversations and kind of see what other people, if you're not just tuned into American news, you're watching news from other parts of the world, you're seeing that, hey, you know, people are not, these leaders of these other countries, what's good for them about this is that they are tightening, they are strengthening their own alliances, and they are building their own leadership up to be much more strong. And so possibly, in a way, this
It's
is
good for the
the
world.
silver lining, that the behind the cloud that will emerge from, this difficult breakup situation. But
Also, I looked at when I'm adding the ring of progressions on it. Just a little while ago, we went through our progressed lunar new moon in Pisces, right near where Neptune was at the time. So right now, our progressed 8 months ago, our progressed moon entered Aries. And so we can feel that feistiness, and we're going to feel those fights as a country. For this is U.S. And for another 22 months, as it then it heads into Taurus. But this feistiness of the progressed moon in Aries, down in our fourth house, there's a lot of fourth house is home, so that's domestic unrest, which is pretty powerful.
And it's certainly showing its face, isn't it? There's a
Yeah.
lot of domestic unrest right now, and for good reason. Yeah.
And that progressed moon at the bottom of the chart echoes what you said about Saturn, that it is that we are eclipsed for a while. We're not shining as the world power, and that pulling back, they say America first, but that means, America only, and only the America they think. But that kind of pulling in is actually allowing, encouraging or insisting that other countries pick up their power and be empowered to make their own decisions. And America's, not going to have that leadership position as the way it stands now,
Hmm.
which may be
And
good for
do
the
I
rest of the
see,
world.
I hadn't looked at this progression, which is interesting. Do I see that, what is the outer wheel? Is that the
That's
transit
transits. That's
for
the transits for
2015?
today.
No,
That's
it says 2015 because
Oh,
Chiron,
you're right. I'm sorry. I
it
should
did
have that.
21 Pisces.
I had that for another event. I think we were talking about. I was looking at uh, when Obama was in Fed. So ignore the outer ring. Just use the inner ring
Oh,
for
well,
now.
I know what happened in June of 2015. Trump rode down the golden escalator, announcing his candidacy for
That's why I had it up.
president. And I
Mm-hmm.
think
Mm-hmm.
that's around that date. It was right
Mm-hmm.
around his
Jupiter is
birthday,
right near his ascendant.
2015.
Yep.
And so there's Chiron right on the progressed US sun. It's like, oh, really?
We have a mess to deal with, right? And Saturn was in our 12th house. What is our leadership? But that's a different transits to today, but the inner ring is the progressions to today. And those progressions are, we're seeing, uh, if we can just work on stepping back and doing our own homework. This is definitely, if we're going to be leading in the world, we have to have our homework done here. We have to walk our talk within the country, which is a powerful place to be. So we're going to come back just to the transits for today. What would you like to tell people about, working? We'll just talk a little bit more about the transits of the moment, and then I'd like to, maybe you can talk to people about how they can begin to work with their Venus star points and your wonderful work. And again, I'd say right now, I mean, also we haven't even really mentioned uh, Pluto in Aquarius is stepping into the, Pluto is going to be in Aquarius, Uranus is going into um, into Gemini, and they're going to be trining 5 times in the next couple of years. We think of when Obama came in, they were squared. The late 60s, mid 60s, when all that change happened, they were conjunct. This is continuing that huge shift that our country goes through. It's a positive trine, I think. And that
It's the
Pluto,
only thing that's given me hope for the future. I mean, this grand sextile trine that's happening right now between the outer planets in early Aries, early Gemini, and early Aquarius, between the trine between Pluto and Uranus, with the midpoints being Saturn and Neptune in early Aries. It's like, everything's working together. So I think something positive is going to come out of this, definitely. And I would say, there's hope for this. Well, back to the Venus star point. And by the way, I have to say, I pulled your card deck out today. I love this card deck,
wonderful.
Starcodes Astro Deck by Heather. And if you don't have it, you should have it.
Thank you.
So the card I picked for today for our conversation was Venus. So
that's
back
beautiful.
to Venus. So Venus is right now for the 2025, it's at 2.5 degrees Aries is where it made its star point. If you just follow the 5 star points of our time and see how it's hitting your chart, it changes every 9 months. And so right now, where's 2 degrees Aries in your chart? What's it hitting? What's it squaring? What's it trining? What's it, what house is it in? What sign? Well, it's the sign of Aries, but what house is it in? What aspect is it making? How does it feed into the rest of the chart? The one we're having 9 months from that, they occur every like 9 point something months, 9.2 months or something, is going to be at 16 degrees Capricorn. So, where's that falling in your chart? What house, what sign, how does it aspect the other planets? And I think that if you just follow the 5 current star points of the time, and I'm going to give them to you in a second. I usually have them memorized, but it is 2 Aries, it's 16 Capricorn, it's 0 degrees Scorpio, the one in late 26. It's about 20 or 19 degrees Leo, and it's about 13 degrees or 12 degrees of Gemini. So if you follow the pattern of those star point, and it moves clockwise like the nodes, it goes backwards, so it's going down in degrees rather than up. So always think of that ahead. You might not have anything at 2 Aries, but maybe you have something at 0 Aries. So that's coming. That hasn't hit you yet, but it will.
And the star point is the Sun Venus conjunction before you were born, and that Sun Venus conjunction resonates for the next 9 months until Sun and Venus conjuncts again. Every 9 months they conjunct roughly.
Yeah, and then the beautiful pattern of Venus is that it makes that 5-pointed star in its orbit. So instead of just isolating one star point, which you can for your own chart, as far as the leader of the pack of the 5, it's that one. But you want to look at all. You want to look at all 5. You want to look at all 5.
And that conjunction that just resonates for that whole period, filling up the energy. I remember the first Venus Star Point workshop I took with you. You had us all divide up into our, figure out our star point and go sit at the tables, the 5 tables. I think it was mostly 5 of the star points at the time, and talk about what we had in common about our relationships, how we loved, what we cared for, what people thought, what mattered to us, and then we shared between each group shared. It was really powerful. It was a powerful exercise.
Right. And it's so interesting to do that. If people actually want to do something like really learn about it, I'm doing a 3-hour Zoom workshop in July for the North Florida NCGR group. It's July 19th. You can find it advertised. Just go to North Florida NCGR or my website, and you'll see it on there. You'll see it advertised on there. And it's unfortunately it's not in person because I'm in Greece and they're in Florida, but we will do the in-person ones are really fun because of what you said. We break up into groups, we do our little star point things, we get into individual chats. Although you can do that on Zoom now, so we might still do that, some of that. But it's really working with the harmony and the beauty of the Venus cycle overall. And it is the one thing that the reason, another reason I like focusing on it and working with it is because, you know, we've just talked about all the other planets and, you know, how they can bring hardship, they can bring pain, they can bring separation, they can bring trauma, they can bring a lot of things. For the most part, I won't say Venus doesn't bring some of those things because it can bring heartbreak and separation as well. But it also brings us joy and what we're here in life to engage in and what makes us feel alive. And so I like leaving people, like starting my readings with that and ending my readings with that with people to remind them of what they are actually here for and what, you know, what they're getting, you know, to tap into the joy that they already have in their chart that they
That's
may
beautiful.
not be aware of that they have, but it's there.
That's beautiful. Thank
So
you. On
that's,
that point, we've hit exactly 1 hour. We're good to go. And we will say goodbye. Thank you so much, Arielle.
thank
And
you for having me. It's really fun to kind of chat with you again
it
and
is.
work together like this. So let's meet again sometime.
Let's meet again sometime. See
Thanks
you
so
all
much.
next week with,
Okay.
we hope,
Bye
Sam
everyone.
Reynolds. Bye.
Yeah.